Professor Dershowitz, great to have you on. Well, you've really kicked up quite a firestorm on the question of obstruction of justice. For the layman out there, exactly what do you have to do to obstruct justice, and why is it perhaps not the case here, with the facts at least we know now, that the president could have obstructed?
Well, first, I know I hit a nerve when everybody on the other side distorts my argument. So my friend Larry Tribe on a tweet today, CNN yesterday, makes my argument sound like a president can never obstruct justice. My view is a president can obstruct justice if he does what Nixon did. Go back to your point about Watergate. This isn't Watergate. Nixon obstructed justice in three ways. One, by telling his subordinates to lie to the FBI. Two, by paying hush money to potential witnesses against him. And three, by destroying evidence. President Clinton was impeached for obstructing justice by telling witnesses to lie. That was the allegation against him. So that all strengthens my point. What you can't do is charge a president with obstruction of justice for merely exercising his Article II authority by firing people, by pardoning people. If you could, then President George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, would have been indicted for obstruction of justice. He pardoned Caspar Weinberger and 5 other people just as they were about to go to trial, with the intent of stopping the Iran-Contra investigation, and the special prosecutor came to that conclusion. He said he did it, and the result was stopping the investigation. But it never occurred to anybody that he could be charged with obstruction of justice. So the rule is clear. You cannot be charged with obstruction of justice for simply exercising your Article II authority, but you can be charged with obstruction of justice if you go beyond that and commit other crimes.
What if he had called Congress and said, lay off these investigations? This is,
that would be the right
Russia
thing to do. He's the president. The president's entitled to do that. And we have separation of powers. The president can call Congress and tell them what he wants them to do, and Congress can say, no way, we're not doing it. That's what happened. The president may have called and said, I want you to call up the investigation, and Congress said, we're not doing it. That's a perfect exercise of the separation of powers and system of checks and balances. You can't stop a president from trying to influence Congress, and you can't stop Congress from refusing to accept the president's influence. So that argument is so far from possible. Obstructing justice by calling Congress? No way.
And what about talking to Comey behind closed doors when they had that, was it dinner, lunch? I forgot. It was a meal of some sort. And saying,
right,
Flynn's a good guy. Flynn's a good guy.
Yep.
I mean, again, reportedly, he said, Flynn's a good guy. This kind of back off on this. What about that?
Well, I have said that so many times to prosecutors. I've gone to see prosecutors behind closed doors in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I've said, my client's a good guy. Look what he's done. He's given charity. Mostly they say, pound sand. But that's what a defense attorney does all the time. The president has unique authority. He could have told Comey, he could have told anybody, I don't want this guy investigated. Thomas Jefferson probably was behind closed doors when he said to his attorney general, I want you to prosecute Aaron Burr. I just learned today from a friend who was in the administration that President Kennedy said, prosecute Stokely Carmichael. You must do that. Presidents do that all the time. Lincoln said, prosecute those people who are in the North and sympathetic to the South. President Roosevelt said, go after those spies that landed on our shores and make sure they get the death penalty. We have that all the time. The idea that a president can be prosecuted for telling the Justice Department what to do is as ludicrous as saying the president can be prosecuted for telling the Defense Department what to do. The president is in charge of the executive branch. He made the decision 2 days ago to send jets over North Korea or over Korea. That's his authority. He has the authority to tell the Justice Department who to prosecute and not to. It's a mistake. We should never have had a constitution that gives that power to the president, but we do, and we have to live with it, and we can't make it into a crime just because we're targeting Donald Trump.
We're talking to Alan Dershowitz here on the Laura Ingraham Show. This entire idea of the special counsel's office, to a lot of people, it sounds Well, it sounds odd because on the one hand, you can't fire him because if you do, it looks bad. On the other hand, of course,
Sure.
it does fall within the executive branch, is very insulated from any real accountability from Congress. It's kind of a standalone in many ways, and members of Congress want to further insulate and inoculate the office from scrutiny of any kind. What about that, just as a general matter, Alan?
Well, I would much prefer to see what England and Israel have, and that independent offices of prosecution, which are not within the executive branch at all. The president could have no authority. You never need a special prosecutor in England because there's a full-time special prosecutor, or in Israel. In the United States, we merge the two offices. We merge into Attorney General the office of Minister of Justice, the political advisor to the president, member of the cabinet, and what should be an independent office, the office of prosecutor. In England, it's called the Director of Public Prosecution. In Israel, it's called the Attorney General. It would be much, much better institutionally to separate those two offices, but we didn't do it. The Founding Fathers didn't do it, and you can't correct that by imposing criminal punishments on people who are acting under the authority of the Constitution. Change the Constitution if you don't like. Pass legislation, but don't use the criminal justice system to try to change our current constitutional system.
Just back to this obstruction question for a moment. Andy McCarthy yesterday in the afternoon said he said Mueller's investigation is essentially now an obstruction probe. The day after firing Flynn, Trump had the White House meeting at which, according to testimony of Comey, Trump pressured Comey to drop the Flynn investigation. We note that the president denies pressuring Comey and that the FBI investigation was never dropped. Thus, if Trump knew that Flynn had lied to the FBI, he was asking Comey to drop a case against someone he knew had committed a crime. You say that's still not obstruction.
Okay. Oh, of course not. He could have pardoned him. He could have just issued a pardon the way President Bush issued a pardon. That would have ended the investigation. The president has the authority to pardon anybody for any reason. The president has the authority to stop any investigation for any reason. Now, if the president stops an investigation that's pointing at him, you might say that's an impeachable offense. Congress has the right to consider that as part of an impeachment process of abuse of office. But it's not a crime. It can't be a crime, almost by definition, to exercise the authority that the Founding Fathers gave you in Article 2. And the one thing we don't want is psychoanalyzing the motives of the president. Take, for example, President Obama made an outrageous decision to not veto a UN resolution condemning Israel and Israel alone and calling the Western Wall a occupied territory. I know what his motive was. It wasn't to help America. It wasn't to achieve world peace. It was to get even with Netanyahu. It was a personal pique. It was an irresponsible decision. Does that mean that we can do something about it other than politically? We can complain about it politically, but we don't psychoanalyze the president. Presidents always have mixed motives, self-aggrandizement. They want to be in the history books, partisan advantage, political gain. So we don't psychoanalyze presidents or judges or senators. Remember that senators can't be prosecuted for what they do in the Senate floor. Judges can't be prosecuted for what they say and do in judicial opinions. It's part of our system of checks and balances that we immunize from prosecution each of the three branches for performing their constitutional function.
So, but you're saying in general, like with this, one could impede an investigation to prevent the FBI from finding out whether there was a crime.
Sure.
But even though that's
what
not
George Bush,
right, that's what
George Bush did. He impeded an investigation.
Right, but then that could just be could be used, you're saying, in an impeachment proceeding as an abuse of power. See, that's all. Then goes back to crimes and misdemeanors, right? It goes back to the meaning of crimes and misdemeanors under the impeachment clause.
Right, and Hamilton was very clear that he thinks that could include an abuse of office, which doesn't rise to the level of prosecutable crime. And the way the framers set up the Constitution, you have to impeach a president first, and only then can you charge him after he's out of office with crimes he committed while he was in office.
And finally, Professor Dershowitz, on this issue of the Mueller lead investigator, this guy Peter Strzok, we're only finding out now that not only was he there for the Comey interview, that Comey, by the way, never had to do, and he did for some reason on the 24th, and Sally Yates, the acting attorney general, is involved there. But so he was there. Strzok was there then. He was there for the interview of Hillary Clinton. He was one of the lead investigators on the Hillary Clinton email, one of the lead investigators on the Trump Russia. And now we find out he was there for Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills. And Mills got immunity from prosecution. So he's kind of like the Forrest Gump of these investigations.
The Zelig of this investigation. Look, he should have recused himself on day one. He, before anybody else, and his girlfriend, knew that he was sending these tweets. And when you send these tweets and you express a bias against one person in the investigation in favor of another, it happened to be a bias I share, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but you don't serve in a prosecutorial or investigative capacity if you express those kinds of views. And he should have recused himself immediately, not wait until the summer when he was taken off the case.
Alan Dershowitz, was great having you on TV last night. Fantastic appearance, as always. Thank you so much.